Hey, campfire crew, let's get it on. Reality show pitch, a possible kidnapping attempt by X-Curious Cat. So in case anyone has heard or experienced something similar, this happened between 2005 and 2009 in San Diego, California. I don't quite remember my exact age at the time it happened, but I was probably 9 or 12 years old. It was a boring night, so my mom, little sister, and I decided to go to Walmart just to get out of the house. This particular Walmart shares the same parking lot as a Kohl's or Target, and as we were walking around in our PJs in the store, a lady approached us and complimented my sister and I for being so cute and pretty. She proceeded to say that she worked for a TV network and her job was to scout and cast families for a reality show. She asked if our dad was in the store with us, and even though we didn't have a dad, I lied and said he was at home. That was for my mom, who doesn't speak English. I didn't want to say he was in the store in case she would ask to speak to him. The lady, who looked quite normal, friendly, and kind of bubbly, continued to compliment my family for being beautiful. As she was talking, I translated for my mom, and we all felt flattered but skeptical by her compliments. Then she said she would love to cast us if we would follow her to her house so she could properly film everything to submit to the company. This was the moment I started averting my eyes to check the shelves for hidden cameras. During this time, family reality and prank shows were really popular, so it made the whole situation feel a bit more plausible that we were either really being scouted or this was a hidden camera prank. I was leaning towards it being a prank because we were, 1, boring people, and 2, weren't particularly so pretty and beautiful as she claimed. Even though I was young, I didn't feel an immediate danger talking to her in the middle of Walmart with my mom present. I knew it was ridiculous to follow a stranger to their house, especially late at night. I then politely declined her offer, which she asked a few more times before telling us if we changed our mind, we could find her in the store. When she left, we checked up and down the aisles for camera crews or hidden cameras because her whole reality show pitch to a first-gen Asian immigrant family seemed unbelievable, and it could only be a prank, we thought. I also noted to my mom how it was odd we didn't even notice her following us earlier when we walked every aisle and she just came out of nowhere. As a kid who watched a lot of true crime and forensic shows like Forensic Files and CSI, I told my mom what if she was trying to lure us into a trap. When we followed her home, there could have been men there, and what if they killed us or trafficked us? We were probably easy targets since we were only 3 women. 2 being kids, and immigrants. My mom also thought it was weird, but instead of going straight to our car, we waited for some time to pass in case the lady and maybe her people would follow us to our car and our home. To this day, sometimes this encounter would creep its way out of my memory bank and make me wonder, what if we followed her that day? What did she have planned for us? Was she one of those bad women you hear about working with others in order to lure women and children? Had she done this before, and was she successful with other people? I hope no one was harmed for her scheme. And let's not meet again, lady. My New House, submitted by T1000 Pete. This happened when I was 24 years old and I bought my first house, so that would have been 1998. I had been left some money by my grandparents, and when my other grandfather died suddenly, which broke my heart and I still miss him to this day, I found out he also left me a large sum of money. I was working and paying off my student loan, but I had also worked all through college, so I was pretty much even there. My parents were encouraging me to save some money, but my dad also saw buying a house as a good investment too. There were a couple of things to do on the house, which is normal for any first-time buyer. But the whole place had been remodeled inside, and there were new things like siding and a roof, etc. It was a 4-bedroom cape in a really nice part of our town, and very different from most of the homes that had sprung up around it. It was built in 1955, but the neighborhood grew up pretty fast, and some of the homes towards the end of the street were what people now call McMansions. I was so excited to have my own house. I was thinking about all the get-togethers I could have there, and also that I was truly on my own. My girlfriend and I had been together for 2 years and were sort of talking about getting married. I saw this as a solid step towards that, and she was thinking about moving in with me. It's not that she was a prude, but I think she was also at that point in her life where moving in meant moving on to other things. It has nothing to do with the story, but we did get married. So I moved in with the help of my family and friends, and everyone stuck around afterwards to have some pizza and beers. I moved in the 3rd week of June, so the weather was pretty nice, and I had to say I had more than my share of beer that evening after most of my family was gone, and it was just my girlfriend and buddies and their girlfriends. My best friend Tyler was as excited about me having my own place as I was, and I had to keep reminding him that he wasn't moving in. He had all sorts of plans for what was going to happen and what we should do, and I had to keep reminding him about it and laughing that it wasn't even his house. We went out to my garage to get some more beer, and the garage door was open. He looked up and said, "Why is that van driving so slowly at this time of night?" I looked up and saw the van, and when I did look up, it drove away fast. I just shrugged my shoulders and said, who knows, maybe he's looking for an address. We didn't think anything of it after that. My girlfriend was going to crash there that night, and even though we didn't have a lot of things set up, I did make sure to have the bedroom in order as well as bathrooms, but the rest of the stuff was going to be a long time coming as it came to unpacking. The next morning I went outside to bask in the sun and happiness of my first place, and one of my neighbors came over. His name was John, and he apologized for not stopping over the day before, but he saw how busy we were. He was and still is a really cool guy, twice my age, but we became friends and are still friends to this day. All he kept talking about was how safe the neighborhood was. My other neighbor also came over later that day to introduce himself and his family, and more people for the next few days were coming over to introduce themselves and bringing me stuff. It was that kind of neighborhood, really tight-knit and very thoughtful and caring. Almost every single one of them talked about how wonderful and safe the neighbor was. Subsequently, my neighbor on the other side of me was also named John, and he plays a bigger role in this story. On the 3rd or 4th night, I was there alone and getting ready to go back to my job. I had taken some time off to get things a little bit situated. I was, however, getting frustrated with the cable company as they were taking their sweet old time getting out to me to get me set up. And they were playing that game of, if I wasn't there the exact minute they showed up, they wouldn't wait for 5 minutes. They would just take off and I would have to reschedule. One time I was even at home going to the bathroom, and they still couldn't wait for me to finish my piss and run downstairs. So I was complaining about it to my neighbor John, and he said, yeah, dealing with them is like going to the DMV. I laughed and then went in for the night, and cracked a beer and just stood in my backyard for a little while. Later that night, I woke up to some thumping outside of my house. It wasn't near my window in the upstairs bedroom. One of them, it was more to the back of my house. There was an extension on the back of the house that went over a patio, and it was coming from there, so at first I thought maybe, raccoons or squirrels. But the thumps were pretty heavy, and I figured I'd better check it out. When I got to the other bedroom and looked out the window, I couldn't see anything on the roof. The windows in my master bedroom are higher up on the wall and really only let light in. You can't see out unless you prop yourself up. But anyway, I just sat there in the darkness and silence for a while. The noises had stopped, so I went back to bed. The next day I bumped into John on my way to work, and he started laughing and asked how I got the cable guys to finally show up. I said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "The guys I saw on your roof last night." I stopped for a minute and then said, I heard some noises out there and checked, but I didn't call anybody. I'm not supposed to have the cable guys until today at 2:45. John looked at me for a minute and said, "We better call the police because I saw 3 guys put up a ladder on the side of your house and go up on the back roof. I figured you made a deal with the cable guys or something." I didn't, but I did go back inside and call the police, and John hung out to talk to them when they finally came over. He told them everything that he had seen, and I told them what I had heard. They filed some kind of report, but there was really nothing they could do as no one broke in or hurt anyone. Still, I was a little nervous that 3 people were up on the roof in the night. But after a while, I told myself it was just neighborhood kids fooling around. And John wasn't trying to bring me down, but he did say that it wasn't kids that he saw. He said it was 3 big guys. I locked up and went to work and thought about it all day. I got out early for the real cable guys who actually stuck around when I was 5 minutes late, and then tried to put it out of my head again as just kids messing around. That Friday night I went to a happy hour with my workmates, and my girlfriend met me there and we went out to dinner. We were just going to go back to my place and watch a movie on my newly installed cable. When I pulled into the driveway and hit the button for my garage door opener, I noticed something odd. The door from my garage to my house was wide open. I never left that door open. But then I thought to myself, there's a first time for everything. But something still made me feel very uneasy, and I told my girlfriend to stay in the kitchen. She asked me what was going on, and I said nothing. I didn't really want to freak her out. Then I heard a soft bump from upstairs. I told my girlfriend to call the police and then grabbed one of my softball bats that I kept by the back door. She whispered, "What are you doing? Don't go up there." I just waved her off and said, "Get the cops here quick." I slowly went upstairs, thanking God that they were carpeted and didn't squeak. When I got to the landing, I looked towards the door of the spare room, and there in front of me, maybe 3 feet from me, stood a guy dressed all in black. We didn't say anything to one another. We just looked at each other, and then I heard movement from behind him and saw another guy. The guy in the doorway looked down at my hands and saw the bat, and instead of being a tough guy like I hear on some of the stories on the internet, I turned and ran back downstairs. There were no heroics on their side either, as I heard the 2 guys run across the room and then go out the window onto the roof. The best part was my girlfriend did have the police on the line, and my neighbor John had also called the police and was out in the front yard, as he had watched what turned out to be the same 3 guys show up at my house. John didn't have any weapons, just his big GSD, who was a lovable mutt but extremely menacing when he needed to be. John kept him on a leash, but also kept the guys from going to their vehicle, that van that we saw drive by on the first night I was there, as it was parked on the street. The cops showed up and arrested these guys, and while it seems like they were just there to rob me, they did have zip ties and duct tape in a bag that the 3rd guy, who was still on the roof, was holding. I remember them trying to say that they were just there to steal, but the guy in the roof was weaseling out on them and saying that there was talk of other things. I don't know exactly what those other things were, and I really don't care to think about them. After that, I had a security system installed and didn't have any problems in that awesome neighborhood. My wife and I sold the place about 10 years later after our first 2 kids were born, and our new house had a security system installed immediately too. Even though it had been 10 years, that incident was still fresh in my mind. As creepy and scary as it was that night, I look back and laugh at it a little. The fact that this guy and I just stared at each other, sizing up one another, and then both of us just turning around and running away. That's kind of funny. I like to think that that's how most of these situations actually turn out, rather than someone holding someone else at gunpoint, or worse. Be careful wherever you are, no matter how great of a neighborhood you live in. You never know. You might have the midnight cable installers pay you a visit sometime. Homeless Man Turned CEO Turned Potential Kidnapper by Kay Ayler. For context, I'm a female, and I was like 17 years old when this happened, and it was in a residential neighborhood where it's not all that common to find homeless people. So, one day I was in some bushes at my usual smoke spot near a public space, but still hidden, and a man walked up and found me by accident. He looked half unkempt and half clean, ripped but washed jeans, long hair but combed and clean-shaven. He had a big backpack but had a wallet and a phone, too. Still, I assumed he was a homeless guy. I tried to be polite but also careful because I was a young girl at this time, and that's the nature of life. But he was also in a position where I couldn't get out of my spot without walking directly past him, and he was kind of blocking my exit with his body. Anyhow, he started making conversation, just generally talking about if I liked the town we live in, stuff like that. At one point, he started going into all these crazy stories about how he's the love child of, like, James Dean and some Golden Age actress or something like that. I literally can't remember. And he was also talking about all this time spent with Cher. And I'm just sitting there nodding politely, pretending to believe it and hoping he'll just go away. Then he started getting into how he was the founder of the Ark, a chain thrift store. Again, I know this is bullshit because I knew the history of the Ark from personal family ties to it. He showed me all his proof, and it was like old Ark business cards and stuff that anyone could have grabbed from the counter. He tried to tell me he owned most of the apartment buildings in town and that he would rent me an apartment building for cheap. Again, the only proof he was showing me were random notes in his wallet that he'd illegibly scribbled on. At that point, he'd been spewing lies for the better part of an hour, and I knew he wasn't just going to walk away if I let him keep going. But still, I was assuming he was just a lonely homeless guy making up lies for fun. So I made up my own lie and said I had to get to work and slid past him, hoping that would be that. But then he started following me back to my car and insisted I take his business card. It was just some random guy's business card with his name and phone number written on the back. God knows if those were real numbers. I took the card, then kept walking, and he kept following. And this is when he started asking more personal questions, and my red flags started raising. He began asking if I lived alone, if I still lived with my family, if I lived with just my mom or my dad too. Was I close with my family? Was I happy at home? Did I have any brothers? How many brothers? Older or younger? He asked specifically about brothers, never asked if I had sisters. A lot of this stuff that just made me think he was gauging not only what level of protection I have, but also who would be looking for me if I was gone, and whether or not I was looking to run away, or looking for someone to put my trust into. Just very trafficky, kidnappy stuff. To end this all, I told him I lived with my dad and my 3 brothers, all of whom loved me very much and were very protective and loved to work out. He said okay, but that if I ever needed to escape home for a little or needed a place to live, I had his business card and I should call him and he'd house me for free. I kept walking. He kept following. And I was not about to go back to my car and let him know what I drove and get my license plate. So I just sort of stopped in the middle of the sidewalk and at a crossroad and stepped aside and pretended to fiddle with my phone, and he walked in the other direction. That's when I booked it to my car and left. I was wigged out, but also, it could have still been an innocent interaction, and I do stand by that. But the way it added up just freaked me out. So I filed a harassment police report, which they did not want to take, but I forced them to, just in case something happened to me or someone else. A week or 2 later, I was at a shop in a different neighborhood, though one close by. I was in the checkout line and I glanced behind me. There's the guy. I looked down and he wasn't holding anything to buy. So I tried to stay calm and I handed my stuff to the cashier and asked her to hold it for me. And then I quickly walked out to my car, making sure he hadn't followed me again, and went home. I don't think he followed me to the store in any way, and at most maybe he saw me walk in from the parking lot and came in after me. Maybe he was even already there and just spotted me and walked up behind me, or it's none of the above. The thing is, I can't really tell if it was just me overreacting to a slightly odd, possibly homeless man, or if it could have been something more sinister had my responses and behaviors been different. Creepy Guy on Facebook Marketplace by ItzyDots537. I'm going to share this story just to make people aware of the dangers they may be putting themselves in by selling items online. I got a message from someone telling me they wanted to buy a specific item, and from the get-go the person was pretty pushy. I wanted to make some money, so I responded. The whole time I was talking to this person, something felt off. This person I'll call A was being a little bit weird from the first message. A kept changing the time he was coming to get the item. A asked me if I had change for a certain amount, and I said no. This was before A got to my house to pick up the item. I told A they needed to get change because I didn't have any cash. A showed up and parked around the corner somewhere so I couldn't see the car. And I felt something was off because A handed me the incorrect amount and asked if I had change. I had already told A that I didn't. Then A proceeded to ask me to get in their car so we could go get change. I told A I don't get in the car with strangers. A was like, "Oh, I'm from Europe and we don't worry about getting in strangers' cars." I'm thinking, yeah, okay, but I'm definitely not going to. The item was a watch, and A started asking me a lot of unnecessary questions about it. It was brand new, and I had already told A this. Plus, it was just an ordinary wind-up watch to set the time, nothing special. A finally went and got change, and surprise, surprise, when the person got back, I could see the car and a few other people were in the car. I had a really bad feeling, so I just grabbed the money, gave A the watch, and ran back inside. Am I making a big deal over this? Uncle Josh here. No, you're not. Period. You're not. I've sold a ton of things on Marketplace and other places, and I'm that kind of person that has left stuff out, and people leave the money here. I've driven to people's houses. I've met people in, Walmart parking lot or Target parking lot, whatever. But I did have one, I think it might have even been the first time I sold anything on Marketplace, to come to think of it. It was a pasta machine. The kind that you bolt onto the counter and then you just crank it by hand to make your noodles. This woman said she wanted it, and it wasn't too far away, and this was during COVID. So I was like, it's whatever. She was giving me decent money for it. I can't even remember. I think it was it might have been a wedding gift. Anyway, I drive it over to her place, which is not too far away, because she said she didn't have a car. And when I get to the house, there's like 3 cars parked in the driveway. So I'm like, what's up with this? And whatever, maybe she just doesn't drive. So I go to the door, I got a mask on to be cool, I don't want to freak anybody out during this COVID craziness. And she answers the door and says, "Oh, this looks great. Come on in. I've got the money on the kitchen counter." And I'm like, "What? Just go get the fucking money. Like, why do I have to come in?" And I said, "No," you can take this, but, I'll wait here. And she was like totally insistent. She's like this middle-aged woman, and oh my God, I'm middle-aged. I can't believe I just called her middle-aged, and so am I. And she just keeps trying to get me to come in the house. And I kind of look off to the side in the corner of my eye, and I see somebody standing at the edge of the garage of this house. And I'm not thinking too much about it. I just want to get my money and get the hell out of here. And she asks me again, she's like, "Well, just come on in." And over her shoulder, like down the hallway, I guess that's where maybe the living room and the kitchen were back there, I see this guy who's, he's middle-aged too. And to be honest, now that I think about it, I only saw him from the waist up. But he didn't have a shirt on, and this is in the winter. Whatever. Again, I'm reading way too much into this, I'm sure. But I could have swore he was naked. So I'm like, what the hell is going on here? This lady's like trying to get me to come into her house. Like, are they swingers or something? And again, I'm old. I'm not good looking. Those of you who have seen my picture, I am no come hither beauty. And I'm just like looking at the corner of my eye. Here's somebody standing by the garage. This guy looks naked. She's trying to get me to come into the house. Like, the whole thing is just so fucked up. Finally, she just goes and gets the money. I grab it, give her the pasta machine, and just get the hell out of there, and drove away laughing, just wondering what the hell that was all about. But the funny thing is I know the neighborhood, but I can't remember exactly where the house is. But it was a funny story to tell my wife when I got home, and at least I got what I was asking for the item. So anyway, Itsy Dots 537, you are not crazy when you talk about weird people, and quite frankly, yeah, not a good idea to jump in a stranger's car. So thanks for letting me read your story. And everybody, be safe out there when you're selling shit online. Hey gang, thanks for listening to this episode of Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories. If you have a true scary story of any nature that you'd like to hear narrated on my podcast or this channel, email it to unclejoshtruescarystories@gmail.com. I read them all. If you haven't already, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel, and hit the notification button for every time I upload. Follow me on social media, links to that are in the description below, as is a link to my Patreon page if you would like to take your support a little bit further. You can also support things by going to my storefront at tpublic.com. A link directly to my storefront is in the description below. Check it out. Buy a t-shirt, you cheap bastards. I'm just kidding. Everybody, be excellent to each other. And until next time, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.